What up, and welcome back to another Malazan Book of the Fallen video. This time we're digging into Deadhouse Gates Chapter 1. Let's get into it. All right, so as always, we're going to get into the chapter, and we'll just do like my reaction slash summary up front, and then I'll leave all the spoilery stuff towards the end and give those kind of newbies a chance to get out of here before we really ruin it for them. So the chapter kicks off with Mappo, Runt, and Ikariam. Mappo Run is like this giant tusk dude who can just straight up eat cactus apples with all the thorns, no problem.
Wow.
And then Ikariam is like a half Jagat, just like raced from Gardens of the Moon. So kind of already setting the tone that this dude is obviously pretty gnarly. So for some reason, Ikariam is trying to disguise himself as a Tano spirit walker, and we'll find out more about them later on, but they're essentially out in the desert, like tracking this convergence, and it's the desert of Raraku. I know I'm killing that, but it was the desert that essentially the bridge burners were kind of forged in when they were tracking down Callum and Quick Ben during the original Seven Cities campaign from back in the day. Somebody named Shake is also out in the desert apparently with a big old giant army, and that is giving Mappo some trepidation. They also have like encountered the tracks of this Aptorian, which is someone who used to be part of like the Shadow Realm, but now supposedly works for Shake, and Mappo's a little bit reluctant to kind of track that down and follow that to create some kind of a conflict, because he knows ultimately that this like Aptorian is going for the one watering hole in the area, and it's like inevitable that if they follow, they're going to bump into this whole giant army, and he doesn't want that. But he plays it off like he's just kind of scared of the demons or something.
I'm so scared right now.
So it's obvious pretty early on that like Mappo is hiding something. He's got all this internal monologue stuff that, you know, he's wondering if it was them that's responsible for like the destruction of all these cities that they're now like wandering around the ruins of. And as they're out in this desert, they're finding like all kinds of evidence of soul taken and devers, and they're all basically tracking this convergence on what they hope is a gateway, essentially. And Ikariam is not really in it for the gateway part, but he's just hoping that by finding this gateway, he can hopefully get some answers to these outstanding questions that he has. And as the chapter goes on, we essentially find out that he's hundreds of thousands of years old, but for whatever reason has amnesia and can't really remember all of his history, and that obviously really bothers him. And we kind of know that because of the conversations back in Gardens of the Moon with Animander Rake talking about how he had met Ikariam, 1,000 years ago or what have you. We also heard of Ikariam as the kind of creator of the mechanism that was like tracking all the different seasons and movements of the planets, etc., back in Darujistan. So we know that this dude is just straight up ancient. But he obviously doesn't really know much about who he actually is. One night while they're like recuperating after their day's journey, they come up against Rilindaris, who's like this 6-wolf Devers. And I'll do a whole video on Devers and Soul Taken and stuff, but basically he's a person that can like shapeshift into a pack of 6 wolves, and he rolls up on Ikariam and Mappo Run. He's essentially told to be the brother of Treach, and even Mappo says like, actually I thought like Treach actually killed you back in the day, but you used to be jackals, not wolves. So obviously a lot of backstory there with Rilindaris. And ultimately, they decide to just like let him go on his way, and Ikariam doesn't scrap with him, and neither does Mappo Runt. But essentially, Mappo lets slip that he is basically on a mission to prevent Ikariam from destroying the world.
Say what?
Then we jump over to Seven Cities to kick off what for some people is like the absolute favorite storyline from the whole entire 10 books. And we get Coltane and the Wiccans kind of disembarking from the ships as they arrive in Hisar to basically take command of the 7th Army and begin putting down the rebellion that's been brewing in Seven Cities. And basically, these Wiccans are just like straight up savage gangsters. They're kind of like the Dothraki almost of the Malazan world, but they're like way more spiritual and just as badass, if not more. In fact, they're, much better at like organized combat and fighting as a unit. So that's definitely a leg up that they would have on the Dothraki, just absolute savages.
I want you to go in that bag and find my wallet. It's the one that says bad mother.
We see Duiker for the first time, who's the Imperial historian, and he was the dude who was actually the guy kind of defending Hiboric at his trial that we talked about during the prologue, and you can go check that out up there. Malak Rel is also there with Duiker to basically, disrespect Coltane. He's there as kind of the representative of Pormqual, who's the high fist of the Seven Cities, and kind of it's mentioned that like by sending Malak Rel instead, it's kind of like an FU to Coltane, that like you're not good enough for the actual high fist to show up and welcome you into your new command. And so this is also like our first introduction to Malak Rel, who for some reason, and we don't get all the backstory, but has basically the high fist Pormqual in his back pocket, and Malak Rel is really the one calling the shots when it comes to the Seven Cities.
Check out the name tag. You're in my world now, Grandma.
And that's something that really bothers Duiker, right? Because he looks at Coltane as this kind of like savage warrior, not very sophisticated, not equipped to kind of deal with all the political undercurrents that like an operator like Malak Rel introduces into the mix. And apparently Duiker has some beef with the Empress or the Empire in general, and Malak Rel kind of turns to him and taunts him a little bit and is like, oh, are you all bitter that the Empress didn't follow your advice? And he goes, look, bro, I'm just here to like study the effects of what happens when you send mages off to these Odotaral mines, which are also kind of located near Hisar, where Coltane is now stationed. And we find out for the first time that like these mages, when they're enslaved or imprisoned in these Odotaral mines, like not only does the Odotaral affect their magic, but ends up driving them nuts because they just can't survive without like access to their warren, and they all end up just cracking up. There's like lots of bitterness about Coltane taking over. There's all kinds of history there. Like he was one of these races that resisted the Malazan expansion and fought, ferociously against the Malazans, but then eventually was conquered by them and becomes like one of these top commanders. And Malak Rel wonders, like, why did he even get this command, right? Because he comes from this like thing of having been a rebel himself and basically shunning the Empire. But Duiker reminds him, like, look, he was actually won over. They fought against the Empire, but somehow, they had a private meeting, and Emperor Kalenved ultimately won him over and became like a prized, fist in the army. And, Duiker throws out there that like he was a strong commander, and the only reason why he got shipped off into like relegated into obscurity essentially was because he was loyal to the previous emperor, and Lassine wanted to like kind of get rid of all of the old guard. That's at least the implications from Duiker. But given all of the shenanigans that the Empire is suffering through, and that Lassine kind of shot herself in the foot with a lot of her own top commanders, he's being brought back into the fold because she just basically has no more able commanders left to her disposal. And at this point, like, stuff is just going absolutely crazy. There's like a mob gathered around the ship as the Wiccans are trying to come off, and everybody's wondering like, where's the commander? Where's Coltane to like snap this stuff in order? There's going to be like a huge mob riot or whatever. But then Coltane essentially just like snaps his fingers and just whips everybody into control. And that basically scares the F out of everybody because it shows just how quick they went from like kind of savage killer to actually organized fighting force, and they kind of know it's the real deal. And that includes Malik Rel, who I think had a little bit of a wake-up call. Then we get back to something that's a little bit more familiar. So we get Fiddler and company, Callum, Krokus, Apsalar, Sorry, all on a boat. I'm on a boat! I'm on a boat! Fiddler's like super cranky and seasick. The familiar, Moby, the Bauchelain, has kind of like adopted him, and that was Uncle Mamat's like pet. But he's missing all of his homies who are like marching off to war against the Panny and Seer. He's worried about whatever it is that Callum and Quick Ben have planned. And while he's basically sitting there feeling sorry for himself, this like Den Robbie, which is kind of like a sea dragon thing, or it reminds me of like the serpents from Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings, if you read that. But so this thing rolls up and it's on its way to that same kind of like convergence that we saw that Rillandaris and some of the other Soul Taken Endeavors were on their way to. And it essentially starts like threatening Fiddler and Callum and saying, you know, sorry, but I'm going to have to kill you. Not really, you're bad. And then Fiddler just straight up whips out his crossbow, chucks a cusser on there, and takes the thing down. And so they essentially like resume their journey, and, you know, Fiddler's just worried about being discovered. They're on the run, obviously, from the Empire. Callum doesn't just not want to get caught, right? He's also trying to go undercover so that he can fulfill some of his like ultimate scheme. Everybody's like still kind of all scared of Sorry, even though she's not really being possessed by Cotillion anymore. But Krokus is complaining a bit, and he ends up kind of dragging out of Callum the whole story about how the Bridge Burners were formed back in the day, and how Callum had originally been working with them and planning to double cross and working actually with Quick Ben, but how Whiskey Jack straight up, you know, won him over and won his respect, as Whiskey Jack does. Like a boss. But Krokus knows there's obviously an ulterior motive, and they're just not in it for the escorting of Apsalar home, that there's obviously a hidden agenda, and they basically own up to it, right? They essentially tell him that Callum's on his way to assassinate Lysine for screwing everybody over. Krokus is like, yeah, right, that's never going to happen, but actually Sorry somehow has Cotillion's memories in there still, or her memories from when Cotillion was possessing her, and kind of lays out the street creds on how Callum used to be a claw master, and you know, all the crazy stuff that makes him capable of getting her done. She also, you know, lets Krokus know that Quick Ben is a little bit more than just your regular run-of-the-mill squad mage, which we as the readers have already known, but that basically the whole deal is that they're in 7 cities to lay preparations or lay groundwork for this ultimate assassination. They're gonna you know, make their way ultimately to the capital where the Empress is, and straight up put in work. So yeah, this is where those of you who haven't read the rest of the books can go ahead and jump on out of here so we can spoiler it up. So go on, get out of here. And for everybody who's left, yeah, I'm just really enjoying the Deadhouse Gates. So much stuff is happening right off the bat. I forgot how packed these first couple of chapters are, and just how that groundwork is already getting going with the Soul Taken and Den Robbie. Couple of questions that come up is just like, what's your take on all the Icarium stuff, right? Because we know ultimately that there's this kind of whole society that's there to keep him from remembering, and ultimately to keep him from destroying the world. Is it because he's going to be so pissed off at all the stuff he's done in his life? Or, you know what I mean? I don't totally get that connection. Let me know down below. I'm sure somebody has an eloquent way of kind of putting the whole Icarium imperative into perspective for me. And how awesome is just Fiddler in general, right? You're already seeing him like blowing up Den Robbie's Soul Taken with a cusser, and just, you know, knowing that guy's journey, and like how he's just such a kind of like big brother / father figure to all the people in the squads and the Bonehunters and all of that. It's just yeah, it's good to go back and see like the kind of pre-trauma Fiddler again. So yeah, this is a fun one. I'm really enjoying Deadhouse Gates again. I can't believe how much stuff they get into like so early on. Even like the Icarium impersonating like the Thanos Spirit Walker, and just how early they're already kind of like dropping those breadcrumbs about the upcoming meeting with Kimlock and what eventually happens to the Bridge Burners. So yeah, just a lot of really juicy, fun stuff. And now that, you know, you go through it before all the way, then you kind of can appreciate all these little tidbits that are spilling out again just in these very early chapters. So we'll go ahead and leave it there for chapter 1 and pick up again with chapter 2 in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, give it that thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, because we got lots of good stuff coming. Join the Discord, the Facebook group, the Reddit, whatever. And yeah, until then, happy reading.